This is an ODB Films production. Visit odbfilms.com today.
In Latin, Renovo means to renew, restore, or revive. This show is all about growing in our understanding and practice of faith. Past episodes are available wherever you like to listen to podcasts. I'm Doug Tuke, the Director of Ministry at ODB Films, and today we look at the Camino de Santiago, the ultimate hike, the ultimate memory, the ultimate pilgrimage. I've been wanting to do this show for a while because, oh my gosh, I got to do this someday. I want to do the walk. I want to do the prayers. It's all about time. We'll find time someday, but I wanted to do the show because it's a very, very attractive pilgrimage for folks, and there's more to it than meets the eye. You can go on all kinds of websites and look up, what's the Camino? Do I need to be Catholic to do it? You know, what's the deal? And you can read all these little blogs. No, it's just a great walk. It's a great way to see, you know, this part of Europe. And I got to tell you, it's not just a great walk. It's truly a pilgrimage. And that's what I want to unpack today, and how bold and powerful it is to pilgrimage. We did a Renovo on pilgrimage not too long ago, and I encourage you to check that out. But this one in particular will be part of a series that we do because of a relationship that we have now with Pathfinders Pilgrimages, which is an amazing organization. We're going to encourage you guys to go on pilgrimages in the footsteps of Paul, and we're going to use the Paul movie from ODB Films to help walk you through that. But we're going to talk about the Camino today. So you got to know a few things about St. James before you talk about the Camino. Santiago is Spanish for St. James, also known as James the Greater, one of Jesus's first apostles. He's born into a super religious family in a place that's now basically part of Israel. And as an adult, James totally devotes himself to Christ, spends his days converting people to Christianity. Okay, so the legend is, there's a lot of stories, all kinds of stories about how St. James died and what happened to his body. But the legend is really basically this. The details are hotly disputed. This is the most popular version. So in a bid to spread the word of God, James the Apostle traveled to northern Spain, but only succeeded in winning over a handful of disciples. So according to the legend, 2 of these converts accompanied him on his return to Jerusalem in 44 AD. And this did not end well for James. So upon returning to Palestine, the king, Herod Agrippa, had him captured and executed. Trivia fact, he is the first of the 12 to be martyred. So St. Stephen is considered the first martyr, but James is considered the first of the 12 to be martyred. Okay, so King Herod would not allow James' body to be buried in Jerusalem. So his disciples stole the corpse and escaped in a boat. And unfortunately, it had no rudder. So they were at the mercy of the ocean, yet somehow the tiny boat and its occupants made it safely to Galicia. They came ashore in a place now called Padron, named after the rock that supposedly enclosed the remains of the Apostle James. And that's what we know. So the Camino, which means the way to Santiago, is a 1,000-year-old pilgrimage to the cathedral where the remains of St. James the Apostle are now said to be enshrined. James, elder brother of St. John, sons of Zebedee, the guy, right? Now, whether the remains in the cathedral are literally the remains of St. James, it's almost irrelevant. For some of you, that might really bother you. For me, it does not bother me at all. And here's why. Because for 1,000 years, people have been streaming to Santiago in pilgrimage. In the 12th and 13th centuries, there were 4 great Christian pilgrimages: Jerusalem, Rome, Canterbury, and Santiago. So the only one that still exists in its original form is Santiago. Unbelievable, right? So in the Middle Ages, as many as 200,000 people per year made their way to Santiago to pray at the Cathedral of St. James. A whole infrastructure had to be built to accommodate all these pilgrims, including hospitals and places to stay. Orders of knights had to protect the pilgrims. Kings and ambassadors had to agree to all the safe passage. Unbelievable, right? People had to extend them aid and hospitality. It was part of the rule of church, right? And today, as you approach the modern city of Santiago, there's an inscription in the path that reads, quote, "Europe was made on the Camino to Santiago." Incredible, right? So some walked for years. Many died on the Camino. Some never went home or went home completely changed, like today. Incredible. So at times, in the past 900 years, the stream of pilgrims has nearly dried up. It just kind of evaporated. But today, there are more people than ever caminando, walking to Santiago. The past year, just this past year, 270,000 people made their way to the cathedral and received a certificate that says basically that they had walked at least 100 kilometers, about 65 miles of the way. So there's a resurgence of pilgrims themselves, and that can partly be attributed to the media. In 2010, there was a great movie, The Way, by Emilio Estevez, starring his dad, Martin Sheen. It made the pilgrimage known a lot more in North America. Paulo Coelho, the Brazilian author, wrote The Pilgrimage, which made the Camino really popular in Latin countries. There are several routes to Santiago. The most traveled, the Camion Francese, which starts at the border with France in Saint-Jean-Pied-de-Port. It's about 800 kilometers, or about 470 miles. And there are other routes from Portugal, southern Spain, and along the seacoast. Here's what you got to know, though. Just remember, it is a pilgrimage, not a hike, okay? Pilgrimages, and check out the Renovo on this, but just briefly, pilgrimages are more about stopping than going. They're more about the journey than the destination. You stop your own life and step out of all the things that are familiar to you in your world so that you can look and listen, reflect, and change. That's the whole point. You strip away all that's unnecessary to that. You want to be able to hear the voice of the Lord in your life. And the Camino is a very Catholic pilgrimage, but you don't have to be Catholic to do it. You might meet Buddhist, evangelical Christians, atheists, even a few Muslims, in addition to Catholics. Everybody's walking kind of their own Camino, their own passage. No two experiences are going to be the same. Even if you walk with somebody else, even if you walk with your family, you walk with your best friends. There are, however, some very common themes. You will be challenged physically, psychologically, and definitely spiritually. The physical challenges come first. Everybody gets some physical challenges, from blisters to tendinitis to broken bones. It just is. You could be the most fit person in the world, but when you're walking 470 miles on a road, outdoors, in the elements, it's just going to add up. Then comes the psychological challenge. It can get really boring walking all day. Central Spain is flat as a tabletop. That's why they call it the meseta, from the word from table. Okay, it's endless fields of hay, wheat, and nothing, with no place to sit down and no shade. Okay, we'll talk a little bit more about details of preparation later on in the show. But you got to think about it. Psychologically, that takes its toll on you. And at the end, the reality is that the Camino, and really during it too, the Camino is a spiritual challenge. Questions are going to emerge. Why am I doing this? What do I want to learn? What voice do I hear in my life? Where do I go from here? It's a huge deal. Everybody on the Camino is in transition. There's students who finished school, people that are recently or soon to be retired, divorcees, widows contemplating their lives alone, people who have survived cancer or a health crisis. And if you've gone through a really big change, it's a good way to step outside your life and really contemplate the past and the future. It is filled with characters of every type. Every single journal, every blog that talks about the Camino talks specifically about that. You really have to understand the only luxury you need to do this is time. Time to walk 500 miles, time to think, and time to pray. And all along the way, there's really there's people to help you. And we'll get into some of those details. There's cheap places to stay and eat, churches where you can rest your bones, people to call down blessings on you. Buen Camino. People will call out to you 100 times per day. That's a big deal. So what can you expect to happen to you at the end? It's this. It's joy. It's pure joy. It's joy having accomplished a goal, but it's also joy because there's such beauty there. So many people have told stories about going into the cathedral to pick up their certificate and being overcome by emotion. They can't even speak at the end. They're weeping. And if you go in the cathedral, you go during the celebration of the Mass from the high altar, you look out over this 1,000-year-old church and you think of the millions of pilgrims who have come before you. And you think of all the people who have worshiped in that space, mostly poor, totally unknown, filthy and stinking, right? And the liturgy in the cathedral, it's marked by this gigantic thurible, right? The botofumero, the smoke thrower, this huge incense, right? This gigantic thing, just the botofumero, it fills the church with the sweet smell of incense. And it's gigantic because it's there to overcome the smell of the pilgrims, right? In the Middle Ages, especially. Unbelievable. And everyone will tell you it's like no pilgrimage like that you've ever done before. But there's a few things you should know. And we'll get into some of those details because I love the idea of you possibly doing this as a listener. So if you set off from Sarria, it's about 120 kilometers, 75 miles to Santiago. And the Camino passes through the region of Galicia, like we talked about before, northwestern Spain. And it's well marked. In fact, it's almost impossible to get lost. The path is best suited to less experienced walkers, this particular one. So if you're going to do a real palatable version, the 75-mile version, this is it. You see the small shells all along the walk. Almost impossible to get lost. But here's some things you ought to know. Okay, number one, there's a lot of different stages along the way. So it's really important to divide up the walk well. Usually the stages are Sarria to Portomarin to Palas de Rey to Arsua to Almanzal, and Almanzal to Santiago. But you can also do it in 6 stages, dividing the longest one and shortening the final one so that you have more time to spend in Santiago. But think of it in terms of stages. Number 2, arriving on Friday. If you want to be sure to see the smoke expeller, the Boto Fumero, the famous thurible located in the Santiago de Compostela Cathedral, you'll need to attend Vespers or evening prayer at 7:30 p.m. on Friday. So the censer, it weighs 80 kilos, 176 pounds, measures 1.6 meters in height, and is generally moved by 8 men. Amazing, right? Can also be activated at other times, but one needs to hope that a group of pilgrims will be on hand to share the cost to see it swing, which is about 250 euros. So catch Friday Vespers, you'll see it. No problem, okay? Number 3, the pilgrim credential. So while on their journey along the Camino de Santiago, all pilgrims carry a credencial, a document with which the pilgrim authenticates their own progress by obtaining sellos or stamps along the way. So the sellos can be obtained at most hotels and inns, hostels, restaurants, bars, churches, museums, city halls, police stations, and at all the albergues. So when you're registering at an albergue, pilgrims are asked to present their credential to verify that they are, in fact, walking or cycling the Camino. And in addition, upon reaching Santiago de Compostela at the Oficina de Acogida, the Pilgrim's Welcome Office, they can present the stamped credential to confirm that they have walked at least the last 100 kilometers or cycled at least the last 200. And then they are able to receive a Compostela, a document that certifies their pilgrimage. So the pilgrimage credential is a big deal. You're going to want to make sure you kind of cross your T's there so that you're able to accept all the different pieces that go with that. You want that. I mean, you want to hang that thing on the wall. It's important stuff. So make sure you go through that. Number 4, the pilgrim crucifix. So at Ferrelos, shortly before Melide, in the Church of St. John, you'll find the crucified Christ of the pilgrim with his right hand detached from the cross. It's reaching out to one who walks for him. Gorgeous, very unique crucifix, just incredible. Pilgrims usually stop and pray before the crucifix before continuing on to Compostela. You want to make sure you stop and see that. Everybody says so. Number 5, where are you going to sleep? There's lots of albergues or hostels in the Galician region, but they are literally besieged, especially during the summer months. I mean, almost impossible to get them. So a lot of pilgrims set out at the first light of dawn, and then sometimes when it's still dark, to really assure that they find a place to sleep in the hostels. And there are 2 types of hostels. One, or a public welcome, they welcome pilgrims. Some are free of charge, others accept free will offerings, while most charge somewhere around 4 to 10 euros per night. And then there's private hostels, often kind of family run, charge 7 to 10 or 7 to 12 euros. And they also have single and double rooms available and have food service. So you got to plan ahead. Don't just expect that it's going to work out, especially if you're in the summer months, because, man, you were talking about crazy crowds. Remember, 270,000 people last year. That's a lot of people. So make sure that you plan ahead. Number 6, what do you bring? It's generally agreed that you should definitely bring a backpack and no luggage during walking. And I hope you understand that. That's pilgrimage anyway. Carry it on your back. That's part of the mystique of why you're doing it. But depending on the day and the route you take, each day you may be walking up to 20 to 25 kilometers, like 12 to 15 miles. So you want to try to make sure to limit your backpack under 10 pounds. I mean, if you can do it, under 10 pounds. You don't want to slay yourself with a ton of weight. You know, in Montana, we do a lot of backpacking, but a lot of times our packs are in the 25-pound range, but that's also because you're including a tent and all your cooking gear. That's not the kind of trip that this is going to be. So you're really talking about carrying changes of clothes and some bedding. And that's about it. And you got to, and water. I mean, that's really your weight. So you got to think pilgrimage. You got to think, you got to carry what you take with you. So you go as light as you possibly can. Here are some essentials though. 2 pairs of walking shoes and a pair of sandals at least, or something for after the walk, that you can just change into. Take a pair of outdoor trousers, at least long pants, a few t-shirts, quick drying ones are the best. Take at least 2 parts of underwear and 3 to 4 pairs of outdoor walking socks. It's good to always be changing your socks. Also take some kind of a rain jacket or a poncho. You're going to hit some rain. You're going to hit some bad weather. Sunglasses, bandana is super a good idea in case of strong heat. You're always traveling with the sun at your back. And finally, take a pretty solid first aid kit, blisters, aspirin, those kinds of things. If you want to take extra luggage, you basically have to have it transported stage by stage with a special taxi service operated by local companies. And that, of course, costs more. So if you're able to limit it, that's the key. Number 7, water. Even though super long stretches of the Camino are through the woods, the sun it beats down in summer in Spain, and a good climb on a dusty path with the blazing sun at 90 degrees isn't always fun. So you got to drink a ton of water. And by taking advantage of the different dining options, you can actually avoid carrying convoys of water behind you. You can keep it. There's ways to fill up water along the way, in other words. Number 8, a must is sunscreen. Be sure to take good sunscreen, especially if your skin is fair or sensitive. And remember, you're heading west. So the sun is beating down on your back pretty much the whole time. Leave the beautiful red and purple hues for the sunsets rather than your neck, shoulders, and other exposed areas. You get burned early, it's going to make for a miserable trip. Wi-Fi and cell phones, it isn't too difficult to find Wi-Fi spots, especially in the major centers, public places, and in almost all the tourist facilities. But take a charger, a USB, but be careful to take the right plug. Outlets in Spain have only 2 holes. Make sure you get the right adapters. And then probably one of the most important things is just training. You got to train before you go. Practice walking fairly long distances with a backpack. Put weight on your shoes. Whatever shoes you're wearing, you got to break them in with extra weight on your back. When you put on a backpack, it's like putting on 10 pounds overnight. You want to train with similar weight to the one that you'll be taking. Running a 5K isn't the same as walking 25K with your 8-pound backpack. It's just not the same. So whatever you can do to kind of get yourself ready, it's well worth it. Guys, listen, if you are seriously wanting to make this pilgrimage, I have an exciting announcement. I mentioned this at the beginning of the show. ODB Films partners with Pathfinders Pilgrimage. The incredible Tim Molnar at Pathfinders will absolutely hook you up with an unbelievable spiritual journey for you or your parish community. Pathfinders has been doing El Camino pilgrimages forever. What an amazing trip to do with your young adults, to do at your parish, and Tim is unbelievable. You can email him at tmolner, MULLNER at pathfinders.me, or email me and I'll steer you to him, because this is one of many shows in a series where we will talk about the different kinds of incredible trips that you can take. But friends, I got to tell you, you might be at a place in your life where you need to listen more clearly to what the Lord has planned for you. And pilgrimage might be exactly what Christ is calling you to do. And quite frankly, the El Camino is the pinnacle of that experience. And I hope that you'll do it. And I hope it will be absolutely life-changing for you. Thanks for listening. Sincerely, we are partners in the journey of faith. I hope you will share the Renovo podcast with friends and foes. Send your topic suggestions, questions, and or comments to Doug at odbfilms.com. Always remember to engage the tradition and live the conversion. Until next time, God bless.